Hello, it's Christian Cassidy responding to our Week 2 History in Spain and France lecture and reading. So I'll start with the three things that I learned. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was like the Spanish playwrights and actors who were females, at least when it started. I know like the church passed laws limiting their involvement, but it was still cool that they were famous enough to even have their names like known. There was like a listable amount of female playwrights, which I thought was really cool. And even then, sometimes they would be able to like challenge authority, which I imagine angered the church worse and probably led to the laws being passed. But I still thought it was pretty progressive for that time. I know in England and Italy it was probably way less common and really frowned upon, but I thought that was a cool way to start. The second thing I learned was the Medici family and like Catherine Medici and how they married their way into French royalty, and then they kind of carried on the influence of Italian theater in France. So I just thought it was really interesting how like the Medici family got like a power grab in France, which was just really cool, and like brought intermezzi and other like theatrical piece from Italy into French culture, which I thought was pretty cool. And then the third thing that I learned was associataires and pensionnaires, so the acting companies of France. I just thought it was cool. It was like the French version of the wealthy men who owned the ones in England. But I really liked the part where it said that they would allow women to also own parts of the company. So their money was worth the same as a man's, which I thought was really cool and pretty progressive again. I didn't think they would allow that at that time. It's not something I would expect till at least like the French Revolution or even farther than after that. But I just thought it was cool, although they weren't like allowed to own as much, but it was still really cool that they were able to still have some influence in the business, which I thought was very interesting. And the two things I had a question about was there like an education or literacy gap in like audiences in French and Spain? Because I know it said like, at least when the Medicis and like that family brought Italian influence over to France, it was kind of a niche thing, and that it kind of died out pretty quick, like just with that small group of people with like Catherine Medici who really enjoyed like Italian style plays. So was that like an education thing, or just it wasn't as favorable as like a commedia? Like, was it could it not reach to as large of an audience? Was it too up there? Because I know the social class structure was pretty stringent at that time. And secondly, with Molière and Deus Ex Machina, was there an issue with the church? Like, I know God's depicting that God's coming down and speaking to people. I know there was like a misunderstanding and everything. But how was the king able to support him? That was one thing I was really confused on, because I know like the king and the church were hand in hand most of the time at that time. So how was like the king a big supporter of his play, but like the church wasn't? Because I know like divination of kings and everything was still pretty common at that time. So I thought it was weird. And the follow-up question to that, why was he not allowed to get buried because he was a Christian actor? Was it like actors were fighting the church? Is that kind of the reason? Or just because Christians couldn't be actors? I just didn't understand. It was like a fame thing. I know like they didn't want a bunch of people coming to the funerals or anything because they were pretty popular, but there you go. Is it strictly like for fame? Or they just don't want a lot of people seeing it or glorifying someone who made a mockery of religion with like Deus Ex Machina? And finally, I thought it was really cool how like all of the countries so far have kind of followed a similar pattern. They started with like a neoclassical idea, like the auto sacramentales in Spain, where like religious plays similar to like pre-neoclassical time, where they'd have a lot of like Bible or a mixture of Bible and chivalry and like morality as their central theme for their plays. And there was a time of like unrest, whether that be like in France with a power grab with the Medicis, or the sinking of the Spanish Armada, English Revolution. It's all kind of like it, like there's like a big problem or like civil unrest that leads to an explosion in the arts, which I thought was kind of cool how they all kind of followed a very similar theme. Although I know in Spain, like the religious and religious and secular plays also blew up kind of at the same time, but it's still kind of cool how they kind of followed a similar sequence. And then I just kind of thought it cool how they all went from like religious to like not necessarily neoclassical, but sometimes pulled from neoclassical, then secular theater, and then more of what we think of now with all the comedias and everything like that, and having a large more like focus on love and honor more than religion as their main subject in their plays. So I kind of thought how the time frame would start, like religion and the church, time of unrest, explosion of the arts, and then it kind of all progressed at a similar time. So I thought it was pretty interesting how it all kind of came together. So that's my response to the week 2 reading and lecture. Thank you.